For the artists, for the passionate. Welcome to the Adventures Elsewhere podcast. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Adventures Elsewhere podcast, or welcome if it's your first time. I am your host Jay Black, and today is the day I introduced you to The Full House. I have mentioned this on a couple of recent episodes, but I've not really talked about what it is, where it came from, why I have it, what the point of it is, or anything like that. Is something that is very complicated, so there are going to be quite a few episodes going through the mechanisms of it, but first and foremost, today is an overview, so the basics of it can be understood before I go into much detail. So what it is essentially just a tracker for all of my completed projects and a target list of the sorts of projects that I want to do. And for what it's worth, this is exclusively writing projects. This doesn't cover my game design or composing or art or anything like that. This is a writing thing, first and foremost. So where this whole Full House idea came from, and this whole list and target list and all that, is the idea that I want to, in many ways, be a jack of all trades. I want to be able to do a lot of different things rather than just write 500 thrillers and be a master of thrillers. Don't get me wrong, I'd like that too, but I don't want to only do that. So having a sort of universal tracker of absolutely everything as well is a huge thing. I've been trying to get that in one form or another for years. At this point, I have databases and trackers for the determined ones and all the extended material and novelettes and all of that, but having it all in one place as a sort of cheat sheet of everything is something I've wanted for a really long time, and that's something that's had to evolve over time, and also organising it in any way, shape or form and making it make sense was actually the hardest part of it. And it's taken me a really long time to come up with how to do that, and The Full House as a title is sort of indicative of what it is. It's sort of done almost like a deck of cards. So how The Full House works and how things are added to it as a sort of marker of completion is, it's not about publishing these works, and the main reason for that is just that publishing is way too subjective. Publishing is not a meritocracy, it's not about artistry necessarily either, so trying to sort of measure all of this that is inherently about artistry more than anything really by something as subjective as publishing just didn't seem like the right thing to do. It seemed way too arbitrary. So how I've decided to do that instead is by, if I have a completed first draft, if I have gotten an idea for a project and I have written from beginning to end, that counts. There is a bit of a question mark about edited projects at that point as well, because a lot of things are made in edits. Charcoal Rain is a very good example of something that really was made in edits. The first draft was decent, but editing has made it what it is. And editing is still sort of important to this. And there's basically just sort of an asterisk by something until it's edited. Is sort of how I'm looking at it. Like, it still counts, it's still there because I've still done it, but it's not 100% as good as it could be. I haven't fully completed my learning around it, so there's an asterisk there. So in terms of what the Full House actually contains, it's not just about genre. Genre is the obvious thing to tie to it, but it's not just about that. It's also about formats. So that's novels, novelettes, and beyond that. But it goes beyond that too, and this is why it gets so complicated so quickly. You also get into POV types, so that's first person, third person, but also number of POVs, and also tenses, so past tense, present tense, arguably future tense and second person, but those aren't really included because that's so specific and so stylistic, and I have less interest in that, I guess. The Full House is not comprehensive, here's every subgenre that's ever existed under the sun. It's not necessarily that. It sort of is, but not really. So to fully understand how exactly this wealth of information about all these different genres, all these different formats, POVs, tenses, how all of that is organised, taking account of individual projects I have of different lengths, and tracking what I've completed, what I haven't, trying to make all of that fit into one thing has been a bugbear for years, but I've finally figured it out. Using a pack of cards has given me the language, and now I'm going to explain quite how that works. And we start with, arguably the most important part of any pack of cards, are the suits. So there are technically 5 different suits, but 4 main suits, as a standard deck of cards would have. So the first suit is the thriller suit. And the thriller suit contains all the various thriller subgenres that I'm interested in writing. This is not an exhaustive list of all thriller subgenres, because there are some I just am not very interested in. So one that is in there is spy thriller, one that is not in there is techno thriller, because I'm going to be honest, I really do not care for techno thriller. Does not interest me in the slightest. The next suit is the horror suit, which is very similar to thriller, but this is just horror and horror subgenres. So, for example, one of the genres that's in there is psychological horror. That's my favourite horror subgenre. And then we branch out a little bit into things that are a little less concrete. Ironically, next is the grit suit. The grit suit is slightly less concrete. This is effectively the extended dark lit suit. So this contains a couple of examples of things in the grit suit. There's slasher, and there's also just straight mystery, and various other things within dark lit. So there's also tragedy in there, which is maybe a slightly tenuous thing, but it made sense to me, and this is strictly my thing that exists really in my brain, so whatever. And then branching outside of that, we have probably the vaguest suit of them all, and this is the quill suit. And the quill suit is named so because it branches out into things that are in some ways a bit more literary, in some ways just a bit more tangentially related to dark lit, but not really. So a couple of things that are in there is litfic. I'm a big litfic fan. And there's also werewolf in there, which is maybe a little surprising, but it's something that I do have an odd fascination with. There's the 5th suit is a little different, because this is not about genre. This is the grand suit, which is not really named outside of that. And this is a thing that I sort of heard about with tarot cards, is that there's a grand suit of tarot cards, and look, I know nothing about tarot cards. I really, really don't. But I heard that a grand suit existed that was sort of overarching and had some sway on the other suits and tarot cards, and I thought, actually, that's a way that makes sense to express the sort of different lengths and formats, because take a genre spy thriller in the thriller suit, you could write that as a flash, a novelette, a novella, a novel, but also you could write a psych horror in any of those different lengths as well. So a grand suit sort of made sense for that. And what exists in the grand suit is everything from microfiction up to novels and sort of beyond. Short story collection is also sort of there, but I'll be talking about each suit in more detail in their own dedicated episode, so that you can see everything that's currently contained in a suit, what projects are tied to it, what those are, how those interact with anything else in the full house, tricks and jokers and all of these sorts of things. As it stands, as somewhat of an aside, the thriller suit does have the most completed cards in it by quite a long way. I have 4 cards complete in the thriller suit, and a duplicate one as well, so 5 in total, but one of which is a sort of duplicate. And the other one I have is in the grit suit. I have a card in the grit suit that is complete. For what it's worth, it means I've never actually completed a horror project. That's something I realised creating the full house, as I've never actually done that. Which is bizarre, given that horror is my favourite genre. I sort of assumed I'd done it by now. So, again, that sort of helps. It helps to visualise, helps to understand what I actually haven't done. But since I've touched on tricks already, tricks are where things get very interesting. So tricks, this is sort of language that's come from bridge. I know there are tricks in bridge. I do not know how to play bridge, but you know, this is all very sort of loosely, tangentially tied into actual decks of cards and card games anyway, so you know. So there are 3 main types of trick, and 2 of these relate to POV and 1 of these relates to tense. So the first is POV number. So this is single POV, dual POV, and multi-POV. The second kind is first person versus third person. And the third kind is tense, and this is past tense versus present tense. These are 3 different types of tricks, and all 3 will be relevant on any given card. So again, this is just me wanting to flex muscles. This part in particular, I think, is where almost the crux of the full house is, because I want to hit every single trick, I want to hit basically every combination of all the tricks, and I want to do that in different genres, but in a way that works. I've talked before on this podcast, though I'm aware that anything I've talked about before on this podcast really is a long time ago now, about picking tense and POV, in this case tricks, by genre. And, you know, the thriller always works really well in first person present. And I'm not intending to really change that in the full house. I'm not really intending to write a thriller in third person past multi, because I think that's ineffective. The thing with tricks is finding the best places to use them. There are so many different ways you could write litfic that, you know, I might end up writing 4 to 7 litfics to hit all the tricks with litfic. That's something that I might want to do. Or I think I'll use a third past single on this card and first present multi on this card. But the point is, I want to hit all of them, just to, as much as anything, to see if I can, and to see if I can make it work and learn how to use these things. And who knows, maybe one day if I figure out how to write third past multi, then I'll have a thriller concept that really actually should work with that, and I'll be able to execute it in a way I'm happy with. This is the whole idea, it's about learning. And I'm aware it's getting quite complicated quite quickly, and it's a bit of an overwhelm of information. So what I'm going to do at this stage is I'm going to give you an example project and explain exactly how this suit and trick thing works, including the grand suit. And I'm going to take Mr. Nakagami, my debut novel. So the key there is already we can know what the grand suit is, that's novel. And it's a political thriller, so that's the thriller suit. Tense POV, it is first, present, single. So you've got the grand suit, the thriller suit, and you've got all three tricks that align with Mr. Nakagami. So that's the Mr. Nakagami card, effectively. Let's take Charcoal Rain. Charcoal Rain is a novelette, so that's where it sits in the grand suit, it's a novelette. It's a noir, so that doesn't fit in thriller or horror, but it is dark lit, so that's the grit suit. And it is first person, so that's our first trick. It's in present tense, so that's our second trick. And it's dual POV, so that's our third trick. So that's the Charcoal Rain card. It's a grit suit card with 3 tricks on it, that's first, present, dual, and it fits in the grand suite as a novelette. And for the sake of posterity, let's take my first ever publication as well. Let's take Count the Stars. Count the Stars is another novelette, so that's where it is in the grand suit. It's in first, present, single, so those are our tricks. But it doesn't really actually fit into any of the 4 main suits. It's not a thriller, so it's not thriller suit. It's not a horror, certainly not, so it's not in the horror suit. It's not dark lit either, so it doesn't fit in the grit suit. You could make a case for the quill suit, but it's not really even that tangentially related. It's not necessarily even that literary. So this is where the Jokers come in. And this is basically the exact same as Jokers in a regular pack of cards. It's a random card that doesn't really fit, it just sort of floats there. That's exactly the same here. They are cards that don't really fit in suits, that have either just come out of left field. In the case of Count the Stars, it just kind of appeared out of nowhere wanting something in the cozy-ish anthology. That's where a lot of them come from. It's maybe also something that is sort of concepted as a card out of spite. So a couple of examples of Jokers, and I'm going to do a full episode on Jokers as well, because there are actually kind of a lot already. This is one of each type. So one that's just sort of appeared out of left field is paranormal romance, because there are a lot of things about paranormal romance that I actually really like, and I think would be fun to play with. A few little tropes that I think work best in paranormal romance. I think it would be fun. I've got a neat little setting idea that is very different to anything else I'd usually do. And that's the sort of crux of a Joker. If it's very different to anything I could be expected to do, that ends up to be where it's sat. There is a little bit of a blurry line with the quill suit, I would admit, and litfic could very easily be perceived as a Joker, but I have such a love for litfic, and at times my writing can be quite literary and poetic, I've been told that more than once, that I don't think it's as left field as something like paranormal romance. But you know, this is all my brain and my perception at the end of the day, so it is what it is. Another Joker that comes purely out of spite, honestly, is epic fantasy. Now, if you have been around me on this podcast, or just on social media, really at all, you know I do not like fantasy. I am quite willing to call myself a fantasy hater, so you're probably surprised to know that epic fantasy is actually something I am extremely determined to write, and hey, here's a little tip for you, I'm actually currently writing. Hypoxemia will be my second Joker once it's finished. So why, though? Well, to see if I can. Just to see if I.J. Black can write an epic fantasy that I.J. Black would like and enjoy reading. Because it's such a rare thing for me to see an epic fantasy and think, actually I want to read that. I'm going to tell you the number of times that has happened. Half a time. And the reason I say half is because it's an epic sci-fi fantasy that's very much on the sci-fi side of it, so I don't know that that really even counts. That's Exiles of a Gilded Moon, for what it's worth, and I highly recommend it, it's very good. But this is where a lot of the full house comes from, and a lot of the target listing and everything, a lot of the cards I want to create, is just to see if I can. To see if I can do it, and to learn. This is a way I finally managed to organise my thoughts about these are all the things I want to write, this is what I want to learn how to do, this is what I have done, what I haven't done, like that I want to do. And actually people have told me that I can't write this thing, so I'm going to prove them wrong and fuck you. But that's the whole idea of the full house. And I thought it would be fun to share that because I'm honestly just really proud of this concept and how seamlessly it works in my brain. I'm aware this is a big episode with a lot of information in a short space, and it can be quite confusing, hence me trying to pull out examples and say, so this is how this will be categorised, this is how this card would work with Mr. Nakagami and Charcoal Rain and Count the Stars. That's me trying to help it make sense to you, and I'm hoping that if anybody else is in a sort of similar situation, where there are all these things you want to write and you have written and you want to keep it all in one place and find a way of organising it that makes sense, maybe something like this would help you do that, because just a straight database doesn't always really cut it. And the idea of using a pack of cards might not work for everybody, but it maybe gives you an idea of how you could try and organise things, like trying to take things outside of writing and translate that. Maybe the translation doesn't necessarily make sense if you know a whole lot about bridge or tarot cards, but it makes enough sense to me, and that's really the main part of it. It's a tool for me, and it's really neat, and I can make fun visuals with it too, which is always a nice bonus. So there will be many future episodes about the Full House, because it's honestly just really fun. It's really fun to talk about. There will be episodes about all the different suits, episodes about the Joker pack so far, episodes about tricks, episodes about all sorts of things to do with the Full House. I mean, I know better than to give you a schedule or tell you everything, but I've noticed with my screen capture that I do that if you look right at the top of the image, you can see how many tabs I have in the software I use to create these boards. The vast majority of the tabs I have open are to do with the Full House, so you can get an idea from there about just how many episodes there are going to be about this, because I just think it's really fun. So talking of Full House completed cards, and published ones at that, I have 3 of those. I have a novel card in the thriller suit. It's a political thriller, it's Mr. Nakagami, that is available now. That is part of the Determined Ones compendium. I do not have a card for compendium, but maybe I should, in the grand suit somewhere. But I do have a couple of other smaller cards as well. They are novelettes in the grand suit. One of them is a Joker, one of them sits in the grid suit. They are Count the Stars and Charcoal Rain, respectively. Count the Stars is a little cosy slice of life story around our 8th Determined One, Isamu, and that is placed in the Cozy-ish anthology. And Charcoal Rain is a tragic noir that is unrelated to the Determined Ones completely, and it sits in the Dream Court anthology. So if you've enjoyed the sheer pretentiousness of this and this episode, and you want to know what the next episode's going to be, or when the next episode pertaining to this mythical Full House of mine will be, Instagram is the place for that. You get advance notice of what the episode for the week is, so you'll know if it's to do with the Full House, whether it's suits, tricks, jokers, or anything else. If you want to hit me up on Instagram, I'm Jade_Black21. I don't really know what I'm doing on there, so you'll get all sorts of just like random stuff on there too, which is pretty fun. Which is also kind of the vibe of the podcast, of just like random fun stuff that happens sometimes. So yeah, Instagram is definitely the place for you if you enjoy the show. If you want to see live updates about the writing and completion of these cards, and get semi-live updates, I do writing updates just about every morning. I also host the monthly Thrills prompts. Check me out on Twitter, I'm jblack21 on there. The platform I'm probably second most active is Pinterest. That is my art place. There's lots of art relating to Mr. Nakagami and snippets. A whole bank of snippets related to Mr. Nakagami. There's actually a fair bit of exclusive world-building content on there too, if that's interesting to you. I'm Jade_Black21 on there. I also officially exist on Blue Sky, but I have not made time for game dev in a very long time. So, I mean, you can follow me on there if you are so inclined, but don't expect me to be there. I am JadeBlack21. Last if not least, if you have published cards of your own, or they're well on the way to getting there, by all means, please do get in touch. I would love to be a part of your journey. Email me, I'm jade42black@gmail.com. Please read the description first and include all the information on there, because it just streamlines everything. It's easier for me to say, yes, this podcast is a fit for you, or no, it isn't. It just makes everything much simpler. Indie and self-pub, you are the people I want to hear from. Trad pub, I will consider you. From now on, I am prioritising indie dark lit because there are so few spaces for indie dark lit, so I'm trying to be the change I want to see. And for what it is worth, for clarity's sake, when I say dark lit, I do not include dark fantasy. Until next time, you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a like, or commenting, or subscribing. It really does help the channel a lot. All music is done by me. Copyright Jade Black 2025.